making those ideas come to fruition and completing a new pilot or completing a new sample, or maybe I've had an idea for an essay or something, but get that out into the world so that for yourself, like for your heart, and also so that then you can circle back to the people that you've been totally out of touch with because you've been in the completely insular world of set and writer's room. You can circle back to those people and be like, hey, I have this thing that I'm excited about. I was just working on this. Do you want to get together and talk about it? Whatever. It's kind of a nice lead-in into a conversation that may lead down a new avenue. So I think that's very helpful in a kind of a networky and professional capacity. Also, I kind of look at producing my own work. I mean producing in the sense of generating, not production. Generating my own work as the thing that will allow me to ask favors or requests of someone else. So I'm doing my side of the work. I'm doing my side of the bargain, generating more topics or ideas and material. And then I can feel comfortable asking them to take a look at it, seriously consider it, figure out how to help me get it into the world. And I mean that in terms of agents and in terms of bringing it to agents and bringing it to other people at studios and networks. So if that makes sense.
Absolutely, and you bring up a great point about the volatility of the industry and the need to be generating your own different projects, so then if one thing is not working out, you have all these other viable ships you can kind of set in motion. And I wanted to ask Jin, you about that, because you have such a diversity of projects and so much self-generated work. Could you speak a little bit to how do you find the thing you want to work on next, and what excites you about the projects you work on? Is there unifying?
I don't know. I think I'm very scattered as a person, so I just have so many different interests, and a lot of the work that I do, it's either because I really love the subject, because when you start a project, it's like you're married to it for years. So you have to be willing to be with a project for that long, like through the ups and downs. And then there's some other projects that came along because someone needed a producer or something like that. So it's kind of all over the map. But let's see, I don't know if I answered your question.
Is there, you kind of follow what you love because you know you're going to be with it for a while. And has there ever been, what are some of the challenges in doing it yourself, in self-produced work?
Oh gosh, yeah, well, things fall apart all the time. I think that if you are the person who's spearheading it, it's all on you. So if something happens where, you can't get the funding or you can't crew up for whatever reason, or if the subject doesn't trust you anymore. I started doing a lot more documentaries now, so a lot of it depends on the subject wanting you to follow them around for whatever set amount of time. When I was pregnant, I had 2 projects I was leading, and both of them fell apart. So I just had this meltdown where I'm like, oh my gosh, I just spent almost 2 years on these feature documentaries, and now I have nothing to show for it, and I just felt so horrible, and but I think those things just happened because it wasn't meant to be, and if I was forcing it to happen, then it would have just combusted at some point anyways. So one of it fell apart because a subject became too big. So we're following an athlete that was rising. She was a very young athlete, and overnight she won this really amazing award, and she went from 6,000 Instagram followers to 29,000 overnight.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. And after that, she just had all these sponsorships, and she didn't really want us to follow her around anymore. So it was kind of this lost opportunity because we couldn't lock it in before then. And then the other one fell apart because I was a producer on the other one. It fell apart because the director couldn't really figure out the story, and then I wasn't getting paid, and so I was I was I can't wait anymore, and that's the other thing about this is I felt as I grow older, I feel my boundaries are getting more and more clear. In the beginning, it's it's such an honor to be on all these different projects, so you just do all this stuff for free, And then later you're like, wait, I still need to like figure out a way to make a living.
Yeah.
And like, you know,
Absolutely.
especially when you have a family, you just always are considering all the different things that you're spending your time on. And I just had to pull out, even though that project I was so passionate about, it was about Bolivia, which is where I'm from. And I was always like telling myself like, man, I wish I had that idea because then I would have directed it. And then I would have definitely like, you know, carried it out. But it wasn't my idea and it ended up not happening. So, yeah, I don't know, things fall apart a lot.
Things fall apart a
Yeah.
lot. Yeah, that's absolutely something. Again, speaking to this volatility of the industry, which makes connections like this and conversations like this all that important to build connections and bridges. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk, Sarah, to you a little bit about reality television. What has been your experience working in reality TV, and how did you find yourself there?
Well, the two questions that are very interesting answers. Well, I started working in reality TV mainly because a friend of mine was already working in reality television, and she asked me to help out on something, and then I did, and then I got asked to stay, and then it just kept growing within that one company that made multiple shows, and I kept getting put on different projects. So luckily, I escaped the volatility for a little while. I think reality is one of those a secure spot in, relatively speaking, in the entertainment industry. It's very profitable for networks, and it tends to get picked up a lot. Like American Ninja Warrior, which I'm currently on, is on season 8, which is like great for stability. And after graduating from USC, it was a period for me of not knowing, like Jin was talking about, not doing everything, trying to just see what your boundaries are and what formula works for your needs and survival, and reality TV worked for me for that reason. And then the second part of your question was how did I get into reality, and then what did I...
What have you? Well, how has the experience been different from working on narrative work, which you've worked on?
Yeah, well, you shoot a lot in reality television. You're constantly, people are always in the field, and there's material coming back all the time. I worked in post-production, so there's material, people working overnight. The schedules are very intense. I'm not sure about like reality or narrative television, and if there's like set hours, like 12-hour days, but we're constantly like working at night. So there's that for reality television.
It's a fascinating world.
Yeah.
And you know, touching back on the USC connection, and you know, Wellesley, so much of our we're coming from a place of an academic approach to things. And Amanda, I wanted to know about you and your career in academia. You know, how have you found that it helps you in your film career, and if at all have you found that it hinders anything?
Well, what's fascinating, I didn't come to the cinema school to teach until I was 50, and that was 30 years ago, so I'm almost 80. And it's and I really recommend doing something that you love, because it makes all the difference in the world. And I also recommend that as filmmakers, you don't go near teaching for a while. For a while. You don't need to wait until you're 50. But on the other hand, you really want to be in production. You do not, particularly if you are producing and directing, and you must be in production. So when you go to a university and for teaching, you come in with serious credits, and you're not hired part-time. And I think, I mean, I'm very fortunate. The timing, and I continue to make films, and because I've made these films recently and they work for people, you know, I'm a tenured full professor, but I think for part-time faculty, I would not be at all surprised if USC was unionized, and part of that is because, you know, part-time faculty really are not being treated as they should be treated. So I would say I love the fact that I'm tenured and I can do films that I really believe in. These films in China were for the Showa Foundation, and they, you know, this was doing stories from World War II, and it's like, you know, it's a terribly short time frame. It was absolutely fascinating. I'd never shot in China, though I've shot other places in the world. I was thrilled. I love working with former students. I mean, my partner on Desert of Forbidden Art was in my, you know, in my class. He's a fabulous editor, and he made those films work. You know, both Mark Harris and I, who are really run the documentary program, we, as soon as students really prove themselves, we can get them jobs, and we protect them. You know, if somebody comes to us and says, you know, I want your students, we don't, you know, we are sure about where they go. And we work with it's so important for you to learn about boundaries, to volunteer. I mean, you're talking about how you're always interested in getting into this field because it's, you know, it has a certain glamour attached to it. And for Wellesley graduates, we're interested in learning. And every time you go on a new project, you know, the technology has changed, and it's absolutely fascinating. So this is a field that is fascinating, and one of the ways that you can get into it is volunteering through NGOs, through the nonprofit organizations. Volunteer to get in that way, you start, and then the big secret in the industry is that the best people are the most generous. And so you find out who the really good people are, and then you volunteer to work on their love projects, and that I think is